Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Lola Adeyemo, who is an author and also founder and CEO of EQIMindset. Lola, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Glad to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I know that a lot of the listeners are going to want to know about this book that you have, right? Which is definitely in line with the whole Zaka movement. But before we get into the book and your life in corporate America and all the several different certifications that you got going on over there, I definitely want to hear a little bit more about your background, where you're from, where your family's from.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I grew up in Nigeria, West Africa, and that's where I spent the first 25 years of my life. So I grew up in a small town in Nigeria called Akure, and I had all of my education really well, my primary, secondary, and my bachelor's program at schools that were all in the same town until I left after college and moved to a bigger city in Nigeria called Lagos after my bachelor's program. I worked there for less than 2 years before I moved to the United States for graduate school.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you say that you were in school over there, you were there for a significant amount of time, 20 to 25. You know, a lot of the guests that I've interviewed, they said that they came here when they were very young. So what made you decide to leave at the age of like 24, 25?
I always wanted to get my advanced degree outside of the country. So I have a science background, biochemistry. My bachelor's was in biochemistry, and I always just wanted to go outside of the country to get an advanced degree. I felt like the quality of the education was better. And my intent at that time was, I'm going to go get this nice degree and come back to Nigeria to find a job, maybe.
Okay. Now, in just to kind of like help out the listeners understand, what was life back home in Nigeria growing up?
Oh, life back home was a large family, fun. I grew up with, my dad was the first of 9 children, and we lived like 30 minutes from his hometown. And I had 5 other siblings. So my house was very busy. We grew up surrounded by, large holidays. Birthday parties are always a big deal. And our home was really a lot of open door policies around my home. My dad was very extroverted and he loved having people around. So I think when I think of my home and childhood, we're not like the elites. We're not like rich, but our family was fun, and we had a lot of parties and engagement and lots of food. Oh, and my mom loved to cook, so
you need to hold up now. Don't you talking magical words right now? You talking about food now? Don't be doing that now.
Yeah,
tell me.
I skip that. Yeah, that was a big part of my growing up years.
So, what type of, if you could just talk a little bit about the culture, what type of food out there in Nigeria? What's a popular dish?
I think it's called fufu here.
Yes, the fufu, the gari, and the pepper soup.
But in Nigeria, we actually call it, the one in my part of the country is called iyon. So it's pounded yam, and then it's the spices and the different soups that makes it really unique.
And now the culture, I know that the Nigerian culture is very big on like advancing themselves, right? They take a lot of pride in like how well they put themselves out there. I know that education goes a long way, right, in that culture. So I know that back home, you said that you went to school over there. You got a significant amount of certificates and degrees. Was that because of the culture, your family? Did anyone inspire you to kind of push to excel like that in school?
I think that has always been me. It's not necessarily the same for all my siblings. I think I just love learning. And my dad was a professor, so I will say he didn't frown at it. if you wanted to, by default, we all knew that we had to all get a bachelor's degree. And we would like for everybody to get an advanced degree, but not everybody, is doing that, which is fine. But at the minimum, everybody knew that, naturally, after your secondary education, you're getting a college degree. But he himself had a PhD, and he was in that academic space. So I think it's growing up with education was a comfortable space for me, and it still is. I'm comfortable like going to school and learning and getting a certificate and learning. I'm very comfortable in that space. It's almost safe space more than the world of the unknown. Is like I know what I have to do and I know what's at the end of the tunnel.
Now, could you just for the listeners' purpose, could you list some of those degrees or certifications that you have obtained over the many years?
Okay, this sounds weird, but so I do have a bachelor's in biochemistry, and then my master's was in biotech with a minor concentration in biotechnology management. And then I'm working on my doctorate right now. It's on strategic leadership. Then while in the workplace, I have my project management certification, project management professional certification, PMP. And then when I was working in supply chain, I got my certified supply chain professional certification. And then now I'm working in the diversity and inclusion space. I am a certified diversity professional.
Jeez. That was like the job of like 10 people right there. But it's so amazing to see that an individual like yourself, is like taking the opportunity to not like stop at just one degree. You're obviously advancing, and you want the best for yourself. And obviously you represent your culture, your community, your family. So it's good to see that. Now, how do you feel like those certifications and those degrees kind of help prepare you for when you went to corporate America, that transition? Do you feel like those degrees and certifications have helped?
I took a deep sigh because I don't think so. I think in America, degrees and education is not perceived the same way for you if you're an immigrant. And I'm not sure if that's the same for non-immigrants, but I think the way we look at degrees, education, certification back in Nigeria, I don't think it's the same way it's viewed in America. And it's not appreciated at the same level. Now, it helps me in terms of my knowledge. The way I see degrees and certification is not a way to get me in, is a way to help me as I'm doing something. So I think that helps going in with that perspective to say, I'm not saying I'm a professional. I'm not saying I have the certification. That means I know it all. I'm saying I know the basics and I'm willing to learn. So that kind of sets me up so that my expectations are not really dashed. But I think there's a big distinction in the way degrees are perceived or appreciated in the American workplace, especially if you are an immigrant, than back in our home country.
Understandable. Now, with that being said, with all these certifications and degrees, you get to America and you have your first job. Like, what was the struggles that you faced with that first job?
I think the first struggle that I would say is the communication. So I grew up in Nigeria where there are multiple languages and ethnicities. And if you are educated in Nigeria, you speak English because education is in English. And so if you are not educated, you kind of speak your local language, right? So coming into the US, I had that mindset that, well, I speak English. It's the US, it's America. English is their language. So I speak English. I think getting into the workplace is then really understanding that communication is way more than just speaking English. There is a lot of hidden communication signs and email tones, and you don't understand some of the jokes, some of the references, some of the expressions, and you don't know if people understand you or not. You get comments around your accent. And So communication, which is like the basic thing, becomes an area where you question yourself in the workplace.
Do you feel like that language barrier affected you when you first started off? And like, how did you work on excelling in that as you went through corporate America?
I think it affected me in that I didn't speak as much as I will naturally, right? Like in the workspace, in the meeting, I will, I have an idea. I'm the kind of person that I just want to speak, right? Like now I have to think twice. I question myself. Do I really know what I'm saying? Did I really understand what the question was? Would I be able to get my point across? I think it held me back because I had to question myself way more than I used to. Maybe in school, even in grad school in America, right? We're all there to learn. In the corporate workplace, everybody else has been there forever, it seems, and you are, you're the new person. You don't speak the language the same way they speak. So I think I held myself back, but then I had to overcome that because you just you need to communicate when you're in the workplace. One of the things that I did was finding ways to continue to speak in a safe way. I did join Toastmasters. I discovered Toastmasters when I was in grad school. And then at work, we had the Toastmasters Club, which is basically a communications leadership club where you go and you speak. You practice speaking and you get comfortable doing it in front of people without a grade, with constructive feedback. So I think I just realized I'm going to have to speak. I can't not speak if I want to advance at work. So how do I get better at speaking? Well, by practicing. So finding those spaces where I could practice safely was very helpful.
That is very important, especially in that growth process. I mean, being an immigrant coming over here, knowing that there is a language barrier, sometimes people might feel a little closed off because, they might not be, that their culture might not be received the right way. One of the guests that I know previously, there was a time when she was eating something from her country, and it kind of like bothered, a few people in the office. Right. So sometimes people just don't speak up. So you've kind of found a way to find your voice in corporate America. And it has helped you along the ways. Do you feel like, could you give us an example of a time when you felt like you really had to stand up for something that you believed in when it regards to like your culture or just like that language barrier?
I think it's in the little moments. It's in the meetings where you're trying to get a point across or you're trying to ask a question. Of course, being an immigrant is not the only aspect, right? It's the fact that I am a Black woman and I'm in a space where there's not a lot of Black women. I'm in the biotech space. So I don't see a lot of people that sound like me or look like me. So in order to get your point across, to move to the next level, you have to speak. And initially, when I got there, it's more of keeping quiet and let other people do the talking. And then having to learn that to get your point across, you need to put it together and you need to speak up and you need to make sure that you're heard. You need to have the right people support you in the room. So I think it's just a muscle you build with practice, especially because I worked as a project manager and I had projects where I had deliverables. I had projects where I had responsibilities. And so I needed to be able to speak up and get buy-in from different functions.
Now, I saw that in your bio, you're an ERG expert. Could you tell the listeners a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, sure. So employee resource groups have actually also been a part of, my journey, my career journey. Employee resource groups are corporate inclusive spaces within organizations. So I always use the comparison similar to like student union, but without the union. It's not a union, but it's a small group, safe space within companies, usually around different demographics or groups. But as a company, there are companies that have up to 25 different employee resource groups, right? They will have African employee resource group or women employee resource group. And so different ones, depending on what your organization have identified as what is an important group representation that we want to pull together. So that helped me when I was in corporate America before I started my company. I joined different employee resource groups, and I ended up taking up leadership roles within them. And that was actually a part of how I transitioned into diversity, equity, and inclusion role fully.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you feel like it's important to have companies adapt and really enforce the ERG?
Absolutely. That's what my business and my niche is focused on now. Is every company should have a focused way to build inclusion and belonging for employees. Now, employees and their diversity vary, right? So when I'm talking about employee resource groups, generally, I talk about these groups as belonging spaces where your employees can connect depending on what's important to them. As a subset of that is now, for me, I'm advocating for one of these groups should be to support immigrants or to support expatriates or internationals, whatever the term you use at your company. But being an immigrant is a key part of, the way we work when you are an immigrant, and sometimes not having a space with people that really understand what you're going through hinders us from advancing in the workplace. So I think it's absolutely important for companies to have employee resource groups.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely important to have things like that. I know that a lot of those corporations are starting to fully enforce and adapt those things and try to advance those departments. And it's always good to have someone of leader who has a passion for it to be in that front line. Now, you mentioned about being a leader. How do you feel about being a leader in your field? And you mentioned about, going into a room where you're the only Black woman, not even just being an immigrant. How do you feel about being a leader in your community?
I have a love-hate relationship with the word leader. I think for the longest time, I did not see myself as a leader because we have been conditioned in this corporate workspaces to see leadership as a title. And the challenge was that you see people that have the title, but were not behaving in ways that was really supporting their employees or their subordinates. So one of my mentors, the first time she ever used the word leader for me, I was leading an employee resource group, and I struggled saying, well, I'm not really a leader, I'm just here doing this. And she said, no, you are a leader. You have this setup where you are leading a group of women around strategy, around vision, around program. You have a goal, your group has a goal, and you have oversight over people. You are a leader in your space. And I think breaking it down that way make it seem very relatable and something that a word that everybody can use with themselves. So I take it seriously if I'm in a position to support other people, to elevate other people's problems or issues, and to help move something forward for others. And I think that's really what leadership is all about.
Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to be, to step into those leadership roles, especially when you're new, or it's not your country, it's not your home. You're going into someone else's establishment, and someone has to believe in you. And more importantly, you have to believe in yourself. What helped you believe in yourself to become a better leader?
I think leadership for me, I don't think I believed in myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think I struggled with it, but my yearning for a solution to the problem sort of overpowered my objections, because I struggled, like, I am not a leader, I am not ready, I am not doing this, but I saw a need. And when I see a need for other people, when I have a passion for something, it's easier for me to jump into it against my own feeling of I'm qualified, I'm ready, I'm able to be in that space. So I think the purpose behind the vision whatever that is, drives me to take on a leadership position and to run with it whenever the need comes.
And I see that your leadership position is kind of, open up several doors for you, but one of them is obviously your company. And I see that your book is coming out in fall 2022, if I'm correct. The Immigrant Woman in Corporate America. Could you just talk to the listeners a little bit more about your book and like how'd you even accomplish this?
Yeah, so I didn't even realize I was writing a book. I just had this deep yearning to understand more. This came up first as an idea for my doctoral research. I was trying to lock in a focus for my topic, and I realized really quickly that this wasn't something I wanted to explore within the confines of a doctoral program. There are certain formal rules around what your topic can focus on. I wanted the freedom to really explore. So I took it on as a project and I started interviewing people because as somebody in the diversity, equity, and inclusion place, as somebody space, as somebody who is a woman who is Black, I always felt like I was just being pulled in. People automatically assumed when they see me talking about inclusion that I'm talking about the Black American woman experience in America. And again, I moved here at 25. I am a learner in that space. I'm learning about the Black American experience because I didn't grow up here. So I realized I was either being pulled to adopt the white woman style or the Black American woman. And it didn't really sit well with me. And as I began to have conversations with other immigrant women, I realized I had more in common with them because our perspectives were very much the same. So I wanted to explore what that looked like. And when I started interviews for the book, it really was what's going on, what is the common thread here. And I did over 40 interviews. And then I started pulling it together. Like, what are the common themes? What are the common challenges? And how can we turn these to a sort of insight for an immigrant woman who is stuck, right? I'm talking to women who are directors and executives in corporate America, and they're providing their feedback like, this is what worked for me. This is how I overcame my challenges. This is how I was able to move up within corporate. So I wanted to put all of that together so that the international student who is just coming in, the immigrant who is in the middle of their career in corporate America and is stuck and is not advancing and has lost their voice, they can find a community. They can find people that they connect with to say, hey, they've been there and they are thriving. I can do it as well. And here are some of the things that they did. Because I think I didn't have that. And I think a lot of people don't have that as well. And that's why as immigrants, we get stuck because culturally we are raised differently and we have a different expectation and understanding of corporate America. So there are certain things that we need to overcome as part of our upbringing, but there's also things that we need to learn about the corporate workplace so that we can thrive.
Now, in your time with this book, I know that you interviewed several different women, right? Could you just tell us about, maybe 2 stories, that resonated with you when you were doing this interviews?
Yeah, so I think one was the legal aspect. I talked to a lady who was being sexually harassed at work, and she didn't even know there was anything about my rights, right? Like, oh, there's an employee hotline where I can report things. Well, I'm on a work visa. I don't want to jeopardize anything. What if I say something and they don't believe me? So there's the automatic assumption that even when something is being done to you that is wrong, you can't share it because you are a foreigner in this land and somebody can throw you out because of that. And so that fear held her back for years in the same space. And again, that's heartbreaking because I can't imagine having to do that. Feeling like you have to take certain behaviors at work every single day because you are an immigrant, because of legalities. So that was really, for me, that was a big part of why we need this. We need this community, and we need to inform people and empower immigrants on their rights and how to thrive at work. I guess another one would be the communication. I had a lady who was writing emails. She talked about emails and the tone of sharing, and not understanding how it was coming across to our co-workers, because being brought up to in our country, and this person is from Europe, this person is not from Africa, is the tone is go directly to the point, right? Just say what you want and ask for what you want. In the workplace is not a space for you to be exchanging pleasantries. And so she was very blunt, and she had a lot of resentment from her peers because the perception was definitely not what she intended. And she was coming from, this is how we do things. This is a professional space. This is how we deal with it back at home. Now I'm in the US and I'm understanding that it's different. So it took having some real conversational events take place at work for her to really start to make those changes that ended up helping her advance. And she's also a senior leader in the corporate workplace now. So for me, those are two different continents, but these are things that we bring with us because of our upbringing. And then we come into this workplace that has its own unspoken rules and cultures, and we have to adapt. We have to understand what's going on so we can figure out where we need to change or how we can stay authentic and not lose ourselves in the conversation.
And you mentioned something that was that resonated with me, was when you said that the young lady was trying to speak up on something that was affecting her at the office, but she was afraid that if she spoke up, there's a possibility that she might, get deported or sent back home. That obviously, you want to stand up for something that is right, but then you're like, well, if I do it, then I lose out on my opportunity. Right. And now, that's a massive, massive challenge, that immigrants do face in America. Just knowing that, hey, look, not everybody wants me to be here. I don't even know if this group of people that I'm with right now really want me to be here. And if I do anything that's gonna not sit well with them, there's a good possibility that it might lead to me going back home. What are some of the challenges, the biggest challenges you think that, immigrants face in corporate America on a daily basis?
I think definitely microaggressions. And that's a big word that just means people making comments or references at work that comes from their perception of your country or the country they think you are from or your race, right? I could share this. This was in the introduction. Part of the inspiration for my book was an experience I had where I was in a meeting, an all-day session at work, and this guy was asking me where I came from, and I said Nigeria, and he said, "Oh wow, how did I get here?" And I'm like,
"Oh my!"
I took a flight, and I just kind of laughed it up, but he wouldn't let go, and he said, am I trying to bring my family over? And this was in a conference meeting room. We had a break during a session and other people were in the room. And I mean, that statement stuck with me so much because there was so many reactions to that question. And I couldn't react because I'm at work.
Mm-hmm.
My coworkers were there and I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, what do you mean? Am I trying to bring my family over here? My family is not trying to come over here.
They're trying to come visit, but that's it.
Exactly. And I ended up saying that. I was like, no, my family is not trying to move here. My parents don't want to come over. They like being in Nigeria. And I could tell that he couldn't fathom, what do you mean? Everybody wants to come live in America. I'm like, dude, no.
Now, I really want you to know that, and obviously your story is your story, and you've been through a lot, to get to where you are right now. But you're definitely not alone. One of the past guests said the same exact thing. They were coming from a different country, and they said in their office when they were sitting around talking, the question had come up, and the question was exactly what you just stated. It stated the individual that was talking to them mentioned, "How did you get here?" Now, again, this is 2022. Everyone knows if you're coming from a different country, you're most likely flying here, most likely. But the fact that that question is even a common question. So it just goes to show that there are common denominators when it does come down to immigrants in America and the struggles that they do face. Yes, of course, is the line of communication. Yes, it's understanding the new principles and practices that, the United States has, right? But then when you have a conversation like that, and in both situations, I must give it to both of you guys, and definitely to you right now, because you could have reacted a whole different way. You could have taken offense.
And I think that's why this conversation, that's why my book, that's why I'm really focused on the corporate workplace, because I couldn't react the way I wanted to, the way I would, because I was at work. This is in a professional space. And I just felt that reality dawning that I'm being stereotyped right now. And this person assumes they know my family history and they know all about me because I just told them I'm not from here. And so what about all the people that are not coming out and asking the questions, who see me and already assume they know all about my family and my history because I'm not from the US. And we face that discrimination and those microaggressions every day as immigrants in the workplace. And we're talking about diversity and inclusion in the corporate workplace, but nobody's talking about the fact that there are stereotypes when it comes to immigrants, and there are things that people say and do that are very offensive in the workplace, and we can't react.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow, it is the common denominators is definitely very alarming. That it's across the board, and obviously you have taken a significant role in making sure that voice of the immigrant is being heard. And it's obviously through your book, and you've definitely put in a significant amount of time. So you said fall of 2000s, is that correct? 2022. Yeah, yes. This fall. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is obviously it's a big accomplishment, and obviously I know that the people that you interviewed are going to be very excited to have their story out there a little bit more to kind of help out those individuals. What do you feel is like, in your opinion, like how could these companies, make it more inclusive for like immigrant employees?
I think that's the big question right now. So tying it into the work that I do, which is helping organizations build inclusive spaces through employee resource groups. One of the things I'm advocating for is also programs around these programs that build education and awareness to where people that are from different cultures, different backgrounds are able to raise up their hand and share experiences. Because sometimes even a lot of people don't use the word immigrant. Only in America where you have the word being used for different level of, people that came from as children, people that came as adults. In America, everybody is called an immigrant, and it comes with different meanings, right? So I think for workplaces is the building support and also transparency around this. When we're having programs and events, is having conversations where people share their experiences and where people, managers, become aware, or individuals, not even just the managers, aware of how some things come across. The more we show ignorance, and we are allowing these behaviors and these microaggressions to continue, right? So we need to draw awareness to the fact that some things can be offensive. Do not assume different things. And also from the other aspect of my book, what I also wanted to do with it is highlighting the question that I started asking the people I interviewed was, we talk about the barriers a lot, like as immigrants, what are the barriers you faced? And one of the questions I started asking them was, how do you think being an immigrant has helped you so far? And I'm actually launching a podcast in summer where a lot of the women that I interviewed will be part of the first season. And I would dive deeper into these. Is we look at being an immigrant, or America and the workplace looks at being an immigrant as a negative so much that a lot of times we ourselves forget the fact that we bring a value to an organization because I'm an immigrant, right? Because I grew up in an environment where there was so much confidence building, there was so much collaboration. That's the style I lead with. When I'm leading, when I'm working with the team, I always want to be very collaborative. That's because I grew up in a community-focused environment. And so I bring that to the workplace. If you grow up in a place where the language is very blunt, in the workplace, you are very receptive to feedback, right? So you are able to ask for feedback and not have your feelings hurt, and able to take those feedback and make changes to your work. So I think for immigrants is beginning to also amplify those areas where being an immigrant is a plus. Here is why you should hire an immigrant. They are more adaptable to change. If you're an immigrant, you've gone through a lot of changes and you are very good at thriving, which is also why a lot of immigrants have successful businesses. Is that flexibility and adaptation that they are able to really go through. So I think for me is how workplaces can help shape that is also drawing attention to the positive aspects of being an immigrant instead of just the negative stereotypes that people have in their minds because of the media.
And with that, that's where like I know that hopefully the time will come, because think about it, with not just immigrants, but just in general, different people from different walks of life coming from all around the world, it creates diversity. And diversity leads to a whole bunch of opportunities, knowledge, information, things that could obviously help, scale a business. Because it's getting the opinions of different people, especially if you're trying to be in the eyes of the consumer. You want to have several people on your team come from several different backgrounds. Like what is your perspective on this? Because I'm not from your culture or haven't or live in that environment. Could you tell us a little bit more about it? So I think that diversity is a very big word. Obviously, like you said, bringing a more positive mindset to the word immigrants and immigration and things like that. It's always looked at as a bad thing. You're right. There's a lot of negative, aspects that go along with it, and there's been some good times and some bad times when it does come down to that word, but there are a lot of beautiful things that do come through it. And I think that, the Zaka platform, we're working very hard to make sure that we highlight that, for all the listeners and for everyone in our community. And you're doing the same thing as well. And I greatly appreciate the alignment that we have when it comes to these kind of things. If I could just leave off with one last question, I feel like, can you tell like the audience all the things that you have going on? You have your book, you have your company. There's a lot of great things that you got going on. And you mentioned it's all about like helping to develop organizations and talk about more inclusion and diversity. Where could people find your book, in the fall of 2022? And how could people get a hold of you?
Yeah, you make me sound like I have is it OCD? When you said all the things that you have going on.
But you got a lot of great things going on. And it's because you're a leader, you're able to juggle those things, and you're doing a wonderful job doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I am doing a couple of things in addition to being a mom.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget that now.
They keep me busy. So I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So I'm not sure where you're going to be sharing this. If you want to share my LinkedIn profile link, I'll send it to you as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, but LinkedIn is my primary space. I'm working on, so my company, EQIMindset, EQI is from equity and inclusion. So I have different offers of how I go into organizations and work with their employee resource groups. If they already have groups, I do custom sessions with the employee resource groups over a couple of months. And then if they want to start an employee resource group and they have a DEI strategy going on, I come in to help and support sort of a coaching relationship as they launch their ERG. So that's what I do with EQIMindset. For Immigrants Incorporate, my book is actually on pre-sale till I've got 2 more days. So I've been running a pre-sale campaign where people can pre-order my book. And what the pre-order window does is people get to come with me on this journey. They get listed on the acknowledgement section of the book. They get to join my author community. So I have a platform where I'm going to be sharing progress on my book. And then if you don't order before April 30th, the book will be available on Amazon in September. And then everybody can buy it.
Okay. Well, the listeners are definitely they know how to find it now. I think that's a great way of kind of putting it into stories, put it into a book. I know you mentioned about the podcast. What is the name of the podcast?
It's going to be the same, Immigrants Incorporate.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's a great way of kind of like letting people know those stories and getting more attached to those stories. And again, having a voice. You know, Lola, you know, from you talking about you where you were growing up in Nigeria, the culture of that Nigerian culture, and we can't forget the good food that you guys do have. You know, you do have a sense of community and bringing, that's a big thing in that Nigerian culture that you mentioned. You mentioned all about like the parties and how you guys got together as a family. So you understand the value in bringing people together, and you're doing that through your book. You're doing that through your company. And remember how you, in the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned about how you didn't have a voice at one point and how you were afraid to use it. But look how beautiful your voice is right now and how many people that you're truly impacting across the world. And in corporate America, and to those individuals that might feel like they don't have a voice right now, you're helping them find that voice. So I greatly appreciate, I know the Zaka community does appreciate you as well too for the work that you're doing. And we just wanted to continue to just wish you the best with that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your feedback. That means so much.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to hear it from, you know, from not just from yourself, but just from other people. And you just got to acknowledge. And that's something that, you know, if there's something that we can bring positive to the table, is the acknowledgement that the immigrant community does provide for our community. So thank you again. And to the listeners, if you want to hear more stories like Lola, check us out on ZakaConnect.com or follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast. Again, Lola, thank you so much for being a part of the show.